Alright, so today I want to introduce you to one of the most amazing dark combinations that I've seen in ball pythons, and that is the combination of two genes, the GHI and the Mojave. And as far as I know, there's really not a common name for the GHI Mojave, which is kind of interesting because it's pretty popular. And as a matter of fact, I've actually seen quite a few people handling their GHI Mojaves, like at reptile shows or on YouTube videos. And let me tell you, those don't even look like real snakes. It's a pretty amazing combination. And if you actually work other genes into the GHI Mojave, you can make some really breathtaking dark combinations. So today I want to jump over to the internet and I want to show you the amazing potential of the GHI Mojave ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with the two genes that make up the GHI Mojave. And the first one is the GHI. This is actually a dark morph, considered to be one of the true dark morphs. If you actually mix it with other genes and other combinations, essentially what it does is it pretty much all the time you always get a darker background in the snake. And if you actually take a look at the GHI, it has a really jet black, almost like an ink jet black background, especially right on top of the snake. And the GHI also kind of jumbles up and scrambles the pattern in a lot of cases. GHI actually stands for gotta have it. You definitely gotta have it. It is a really awesome gene. And here is the other gene in the mix, and that is the Mojave. The Mojave is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So if you actually take two Mojaves and breed them together, you get an all-white snake with blue eyes. Pretty amazing. And this is what happens if you take the Mojave and you breed it with the GHI. 25% of the time, this is what you get. Take a look at this. This is the GHI Mojave, and I would have to say this is probably one of the most impressive examples of the GHI Mojave. The example that I really like is the GHI Mojaves that are really super dark black on the sides that are almost completely patternless. And I'd say it's kind of unusual to get one like this that's really super black and patternless. Pretty amazing. And a lot of times the stripe right on the top, sometimes it's just glowing so bright. It is really amazing. Really an amazing combination. And I actually pulled up a few more examples of the GHI Mojave so you can really see kind of the variability from one example to another. So take a look at this one. This is the same exact genes, believe it or not. And this one is actually not really dark black. Sometimes you can get all the way from like this brownish coppery color all the way to a jet black. It's kind of an interesting, kind of a difference between the different examples of the same genes. And a lot of times you'll see, especially in these last two examples, you'll actually see that a lot of the pattern is completely wiped out on the sides, and that's not always the case. I actually pulled up a couple more. Take a look at this one. This is a GHI Mojave, and this one, look at the color of the stripe right down the back. You know, a lot of times it doesn't have a solid stripe. Sometimes it's kind of like a jagged line on the top. Sometimes it's a really smooth line. It's pretty amazing the differences in the different visual appearances of the GHI Mojave. And you can actually see on this one, it has quite a bit of pattern on the side. I actually pulled up one more. Take a look at this one. This one is pretty unbelievable. It's the same exact genes, the GHI and the Mojave, and look at how much pattern it actually has on the side. So you can kind of get an idea from, you know, going from a lot of pattern to almost completely patternless, from a reddish brown all the way to almost a jet black. It's pretty amazing. So if you actually take the GHI Mojave and you breed it to a Mojave, you can actually run into some problems. This is what you actually get. Take a look at this. You actually get a super Mojave GHI, which is an all-white snake with blue eyes. And sometimes you don't actually want to, produce a white snake. Sometimes you want to produce some dark snakes if you actually go into the dark side. And it's kind of interesting with the Mojave, if you actually breed the Mojave GHI to anything else in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, you'll end up with an all-white snake which masks all the other genes in the basically underneath the white snake. So this one actually has possible GHI. This white snake was so intense and it covers up all the genes so well that you can't even tell that the GHI is underneath this white snake. Pretty amazing. And it's kind of the interesting thing about the Super Mojave is they always kind of have this kind of a gray head. It's kind of an interesting anomaly when you have Super Mojave. But if you actually breed the GHI Mojave to any other gene in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, and there's quite a few of them. There's the bamboo, the lesser, the Mojave, the Russo, the Mocha, the Phantom, the Mystic, all of those. There's a whole bunch of them, and you essentially end up with, most of the times you end up with a white snake, and sometimes if you actually breed the Mojave to like a Phantom, you'll get like the purple passions, or like in the case of a Mystic, you'll get a Mystic potion with the Mystic and the Mojave. So here I kind of wanted to show you some of the other genes that we can mix in with the GHI Mojave to make some really impressive combinations. And let me tell you, you can actually improve on the GHI Mojave by adding the right genes. You can make some pretty amazing combinations. And to start with, I wanted to show you what happens when we work Pastel into the GHI Mojave. And the Pastel is one of the most popular genes in all of ball pythons. It really brings out a lot of yellow in the snake, and a lot of times you'll actually get quite a huge reduction in the pattern. Sometimes it really jumbles up the pattern. And here's what happens if you work Pastel into a GHI Mojave. Take a look at this. This is pretty amazing. It actually really enhances the brightness of the top, and sometimes it'll actually kind of take away from some of the darkness on the side. And sometimes it's kind of a balance between getting some really bright colors on the top or darkening the side. And I would say probably the ideal combination, it depends on kind of what look you're going for, but I really like the look where it's really super dark on the back and then has really super bright highlights. And there's kind of a whole bunch of different kind of modifications you can make to the GHI Mojave to make a whole bunch of different visual effects. So you can actually take the same thing and add one more copy of the Pastel gene. So you can actually make a super pastel GHI Mojave, and take a look at what this looks like. That is a crazy thing. This is probably one of the most craziest GHI Mojave combos that I've ever seen. You actually get some yellow almost coming in on the sides from the super pastel. And look at the stripe on the top of this. This is really crazy. It looks like it's so intense. It's pretty unbelievable. So here is the spider ball python. As a matter of fact, I actually pulled up this picture of a spider in someone's hand so you can actually see how intense and how beautiful the spider can be as a standalone morph. Sometimes you just show a picture of it and you really can't see how amazing some of these snakes are. But if you actually hold them in your hand, just take a look at this. This thing is almost glowing. It is pretty amazing. Spider is a dominant mutation. So if you actually breed it to anything else, half the offspring come out of spider. And here's what happens when you work spider into the GHI Mojave. Take a look at this. This is really an unusual effect. It almost completely obliterates the spider pattern, almost turns it into, you know, the first time I looked at this, this almost looks like a vanilla cream with the vanilla and the fire on an allelic complex, and it completely changes the spider. It is pretty amazing. If you actually go back and look at the spider usually has a really defined spider web pattern on the back of the snake, and it's usually really visually dominant. And usually when you work it into other combinations, you can see the spider, and in this case you can't really see any of the spider left over. It is pretty amazing. So here is the yellow belly, and when it comes to kind of sleeper morphs, I'd say the yellow belly is probably the king. As a standalone morph, it's not really that impressive. A lot of times they'll look almost exactly like the normal wild type ball python, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a normal and a yellow belly. And usually you can see like little flames coming up right along the belly here. You can kind of see it between the patterns, and sometimes you can actually see on the belly it has kind of a jumbled up pattern on either side of the belly. And some people say, you know, some yellow bellies actually will have a yellow belly, but it's not always the case. It's kind of one of those things that, you know, sometimes it can be really variable. I've actually seen yellow bellies with no flames on the side, and the belly looks pretty clear, and it's really hard to actually tell that it's yellow belly. But when you mix yellow belly into other combinations, you can have some really dramatic effects. And here's what happens if you work yellow belly into the GHI Mojave. Take a a look at this. I think this is probably one of my favorite Mojave GHI combinations with the yellow belly. Look at the stripe on this thing, the little dashed lines on here, how bright it is. Sometimes it's kind of amazing because you see these in person and it's almost impossible to catch these correctly on film because you have a really bright line on top and then you have a really dark background. And sometimes it can be a little overexposed or a little underexposed because you're playing with two really dark and a really bright color in contrast with each other, and sometimes it's hard to actually capture them. This one, I'd say this is probably one of the best photographs that I've ever seen of a GHI Mojave, and then you add yellow belly in the mix and it's just unbelievable. So here is the banana. As a matter of fact, the banana, a lot of people think it's the same thing as the coral glow. Pretty much two different lines of the same gene, pretty much interchangeable. And the banana and the coral glow are both really visually dominant. So you mix it in with other combinations and you can almost always see the banana and the coral glow in the mix. And here's what happens if you were a coral glow into the GHI Mojave. Take a look at this. This is pretty amazing. It really dominates the GHI Mojave, really takes away all the darkness on the side and even fades out the line up on the top. Makes for a really interesting combination. It's kind of actually hard to pick out the genes in this if someone just handed you the snake. It's a pretty amazing combination. So here is the ghost, and when it comes to ghosts, I'd say the more I look into ghosts, the more I'm kind of warming up to the ghosts and the orange ghost. And the ghost is actually a recessive mutation. You need 2 copies of the ghost to see a visual, and essentially what the ghost does is it really fades out the snake. Almost looks like it's kind of going into shed in a lot of cases. But kind of the cool thing about ghosts is a lot of times if you have like kind of like the pixelation on the side where you kind of get like a dirty snake, it'll really smooth it out and makes for a really kind of a creamy appearance of the snake. And here's what happens if you were a ghost into the GHI Mojave, and take a look at this. This was really unexpected. When I started looking at these, it was pretty amazing. Every single ghost GHI Mojave that I saw over here has this kind of a gray color, almost like, I'd say it's probably the grayest snake that I've ever seen in ball pythons. Pretty amazing that you can get this really kind of a bright gray color on these snakes. It's kind of an unusual combination. All right, so here is the Pinstripe, and let me tell you, when it comes to codominant mutations, I think the Pinstripe is one of my favorites. It is a super bright gold snake, probably the brightest gold snake that you can get, and it's actually a dominant mutation, so if you breed it to something else, half the offspring come out as Pinstripe, and usually in a lot of Pinstripe combos, a lot of times you can actually get the gold color coming through in a lot of combinations. And here's what happens if you work Pinstripe into the GHI Mojave. Take a look at this. This was pretty unexpected to get a combination like this. The Pinstripe pretty much eliminates most of the gold color of the snake, and you get this really super, like a really super stripe right down the side. As a matter of fact, when I was actually looking at this, I was thinking this looks almost like the super stripe, which is an allelic combination that makes a really strong stripe right down the top of the snake. Really impressive combination. Of course, it really takes away some of the dark color and really changes the look. You're kind of going away kind of from the dark side adding Pinstripe, but it makes for a really interesting combination. So here is the champagne, and let me tell you, when you're working with champagne, I'd say it's probably one of the most difficult genes to actually get pattern to show up through the snake. A lot of times when you're working champagne into other combinations, you end up with a patternless snake in a lot of cases and just really change the color of the snake. And here's what happens if you work champagne into the GHI Mojave, and take a look at this. This was really unexpected. As a matter of fact, I was looking at several examples of the champagne GHI Mojave, and all of them ended up in a completely patternless bright gold snake. Almost looks like it's almost golder than the Pinstripe. Makes for a really impressive combination. And sometimes with the champagne you can get these little ringers on the tail, and sometimes that's an indication that you actually have het pied in the mix with champagne, and sometimes it's just kind of a random anomaly. But this is probably one of the best champagne combos that I've seen. Really amazing. So here is the Leopard ball python, and the Leopard is kind of a pseudo dark morph. If you actually mix it with genes like the banana or the coral glow, a lot of times it won't actually darken them very much. And if you actually mix them with a dark morph, a lot of times it'll make them really super dark, like almost an inkjet black background. And a lot of times the Leopard will really scramble up the pattern with a lot of combinations they mix it with. And here's what happens if you work Leopard into the GHI Mojave. And take a look at this. This was really unexpected for me. You know, as a matter of fact, when I was thinking of mixing the Leopard with the GHI, I thought it would take the GHI and make it even darker, which I thought was going to be like a super jet black background. And it was kind of amazing that it's not as dark as I thought it was going to be. And the pattern on this, I'm bringing it all the way down the sides. That is pretty amazing. It's probably one of the few genes that can actually break into the appearance of the GHI Mojave that really brings just the pattern and the stripe right to the top of the snake. Pretty interesting combination. So here is the clown ball python. Let me tell you, when you mix GHI Mojave with the clown, you get one of the craziest looking snakes I've ever seen. The clown is a recessive mutation. You actually need 2 copies of the gene to make a visual. And the clown, I would consider it kind of the king of combos as far as recessive mutations. You mix almost anything with the clown and you make some really insane looking combinations. And here's what happens if you mix GHI Mojave into a clown. Take a look at this. This is kind of one of the craziest snakes that I have ever seen. You almost get some of the grays, like a grayish blue background coming through with this really crazy pattern. As a matter of fact, it's another gene that really breaks up the stripe on the top and brings it down the sides, kind of like the Leopard. Makes for one of the most amazing clown combos that I've seen. Really unusual and really unique. As a matter of fact, I actually don't have GHI Mojave in my collection. I don't have either gene. But if I was to actually get a GHI Mojave, I would probably, the first thing I would do is breed it to one of my clown females. And take a look at the price on this one. This is actually $3,200. Pretty crazy price for a really amazing snake. And that's pretty, I'd say it's pretty typical for a lot of your clown combinations to actually be really expensive, especially when you're working it into, you know, multiple genes into the clown, and to make something that's really unique that is never, you know, I'd say there's probably very few combinations of clowns that look anything like this. Pretty amazing. And there's one more I wanted to show you at the end. This one is kind of the craziest combination I've ever seen. Take a look at this. This is probably the purplest snake that I have ever seen in all of ball pythons. You know, there's really not a purple gene in ball pythons. There's, you know, there's purples. Like if you do like the purple passion or the mystic potion, you can get almost kind of purple. I've actually seen like in some of the champagne ghosts, we have like a bright purple right along the kind of the stripe right on the back, but I've never really seen such a purple snake. Pretty amazing. This is actually the GHI Mojave with the combination of banana and cinnamon. Pretty amazing. And one of the things that, you know, it's kind of sitting in the back of my mind, I wonder if this would keep the purple as it aged and matured. That would be pretty awesome. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Logan Sarton asks, I'm just getting into breeding ball pythons and I have one albino female. What should I breed her with? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, I do get a lot of questions. Hey, I have these snakes. Which ones should I breed together, or what should I buy to breed to my snake? And I'd say with an albino, there's quite a few things you can actually do. What I would actually do is I would get a het albino or another visual albino. You can actually produce visual albinos right from the beginning. Remember, the albino is a recessive mutation. So if you actually take an albino and you breed it to a normal, you'll get all normal looking snakes that are 100% het for albino. That's one of the challenges of actually working with a recessive. And another cool thing you can do is work black pastel into an albino. And if you actually produce a black pastel albino, you'll get a really high white albino. They make for some really awesome combinations. And probably the number one thing you can do with an albino is to work pied into the albino. So you actually can buy a pied, breed the albino to the pied, and then you'll end up with all normal looking snakes that are double het for albino and pied. But if you actually breed them together and get the double visual, the albino pieds are really super popular. They're really visually stunning and they can sell for quite a bit of money too. Makes for a really awesome project. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.